I have been involved in such research since 2008. It was a dream of mine, a little dream of mine, because I was always interested. My father worked for an institute calculating and measuring water ecosystems of Chernobyl zone, and he would tell me the tales about behavior, conduct of radionuclides in the water. So let me share some background story with you. There's this nuclear event scale, and according to it, they identify the level of events. They are all registered, classified, and you can see that in fact, nuclear events are not that rare. And we have to add that many radionuclides get released into the environment during some explosions, boom explosions, boom tests. But the events of this are man-made, of this sort are man-made. And that is reflected on the scale. Such events have high risk, but they are classified as incidents. And that was Mayak disaster in 1957. Three Mile Island, Japan, two disasters, man-made with the highest status. A big accident in 1986 in Chernobyl, at PP with the exclusion zone and evacuation from the radius of 30 kilometers. And the disaster on the 11th of March that happened in Fukushima in Japan. That was the 20-kilometer radius. I use many testing fields in Chernobyl exclusion zones. Testing fields are scattered all over the territory so that we can monitor the low contamination areas and high contamination areas. And additionally, we started research in the territory of the cooling pond. You can see here the right-hand bottom corner. And we have the Moretzi area. The anthropocentric principle is replaced by the ecocentric. We are ecosystem centered approach. So we cannot be focused on human being alone, because if we destroy the environment, the dosage will be too high for the people to survive. Without the ecosystem, we cannot exist as living beings. So we have to pick up the varieties, and my predecessor discussed that indicative and telling us, or representative telling us about the response of ecosystems to such impacts. And we had to pick up the proper indicators and see how the varieties exist and what kind of areas they have for their habitat. For the mice and mice-like varieties, it is very representative. They migrate for 1 to 2 kilometers. For wolves, it's 30 to 40 square kilometers for the pack. So such varieties are not very good for the measurements of that sort. So they have high breeding rates, they're available, and it's easy to single them out of the environment. It is very important how they live, in what conditions, and the most important component is funding, of course, for any kind of research. This is the most inexpensive, one of the most inexpensive varieties for research. What radiobiology does, the ionizing irradiation and its impact on living organisms. How can we study that or register? We can look on a living organism and see something or don't see something, or we can use special equipment like microscopes.
With the simple bare eye method, we can see some mutations that we will document visually. For example, the change in the sizes and the colors of leafage, etc. But if we look inside the organism and we use microscopy, then we will see changes in the cell structures. We can see larger circles, nucleides of the cells, and smaller ones. These are micronucleides. Why would we have to look at micronucleides? As the most of changes under the impact of ionizing radiation is not perceivable for the human eye. And there are some animals that have no morphological specifics, and they usually survive. But if we look inside the body, then we will see certain markers, micronucleides, for example, and how they are formed. Ionizing radiation affects chromosomes, and some parts of those chromosomes are chipped off, and they form micronucleides. And that's a very easy and cheap way to analyze the impact of ionizing radiation. Here you can see the results of our research. Chernobyl exclusion zone as a test field is very interesting and unique, but it still actually poses lots of questions to us, because when it comes to animals living at territories with low contamination level, we can see certain changes and mutations that are not observed in high contaminated areas. And usually we get more questions than we can answer. And oftentimes, radiobiologists discuss certain regularities between the response to different doses. It is a very important indicator, but we should understand that all of those links are non-linear, and that's the major problem of radiobiology. Yeah, in the area of conventionally low doses, we cannot say which dose will bring about what effect. And the findings show that animals residing in that territory have not yet adjusted themselves or adapted to the ionizing radiation doses. Sometimes people say, let us register the impact of ionizing radiation as a mutation, but we cannot observe those physical mutations. We can only observe them inside the animals' bodies at the biological level. And why is it so challenging, so difficult? In the Chernobyl exclusion zone territory, a lot of events are occurring. For example, secondary succession, territories that used to be fields turn into forests. Then hydrological regime is changes, because in the Soviet time, the territory was being irrigated all the time, but now it returns into its natural state. Wildfires occur, and journalists write a lot about them, and local floods also occur, and all of that affects populations of animals residing there. That changes their life cycles, and that pertains to both large and small animals. It changes the dose regime and radiological effects that we can observe. Here, this slide demonstrates results of our research at the cooling point of Chernobyl NPP. And you can see that at first everything seems to be blue, and then red starts to emerge, which means that one species is gradually being replaced by another. And there's a number of challenges when it comes to working in Chernobyl zone. First of all, reduced funding, underfunding, chronicle underfunding, I would say, and lack of the common coordinated research program. Unfortunately, we do not use the full capacity of this zone as a research test field. This research should be ongoing, but without funding, you cannot do it on a permanent basis. And the lack of this general coordinated program disallows different organizations to work either in the same test fields or in similar or analogous test fields, so that we can get the broader picture, the overall picture of the research and of the situation on the ground, particularly given that the environment is gradually changing. Besides, there are lots of white spots or gaps, not only in terms of radiobiology, but also radioecology and radiation research in general. For example, we do not study biological effects on larger mammals. Neither Ukrainian nor Western researchers do that. We don't know what happens to the animals' bodies as a result of this impact. We don't know what happens to wolves, to large carnivores. The majority of research focuses on either fish or smaller animals. And one more issue that I singled out here is quote unquote extinct researchers, because a lot of people who engage in radiobiology professionally either give up their research once they have got their PhD degrees, or else they migrate abroad. So why is it important to do in radiobiological research and to persevere in it? We cannot research people in their response to radiological contamination in the zone, but we can actually study that impact on mammals who live there already. And when we work with wild animals, we can study the critical organs and systems. For example, blood system, which is very similar in all mammals. And that is very important because ionizing radiation affects the division of cells, and that pertains in particular to bone marrow that produces blood cells. It is also very important to think about this imaginary well-being. When you go to the zone, you won't see any mutations, but you will see animals, lots of such animals, and you don't know what is going on in their bodies. As a result of research, as I said before, we get more and more questions that we cannot answer today. To many, Chernobyl is about a myth. It's something unknown and worrisome. There are lots of legends and myths remembered to that zone. And that is why we need to communicate reliable and truthful information about both research in the zone and the situation in the zone. And that will, on the one hand, promote research so that people know, the taxpayers particularly know where their money goes. And if that occurs timely, that will reduce this radiophobia and hysteria related to, for example, wildfires close to Chernobyl zone. And it will actually warn people against picking mushrooms close to this zone. Reliable information will be conducive to reducing the number of myths about millions and wolves residing there, or very frightful foxes or lynxes that live there. Thank you very much, Elena, for a wonderful presentation, most interesting one. I, of course, would like to ask a couple of questions of you, if I may. One of them is as follows. Being a zoologist by background, you will have your own opinion about the feasibility of constructing NPPs in the zone or expanding the energy sector towards the exclusion zone. Do you think it is really feasible, or should the reserve be, as the term suggests, a reserve, not to be trespassed by economic activities? Yeah, the Chernobyl zone is a reserve, and it actually fulfills its barrier function. But at the same time, there's a 10-kilometer zone which is extremely contaminated. And there are certain areas that are not that contaminated, and some economic activity is underway there anyway. And there is the Chernobyl NPP, which is being decommissioned, and certain activity will be going on anyway. So I cannot see any conflict between the maintenance and economic exploitation of the 10-kilometer zone and the reserve and its operation.